Canto 1, The Destined Meeting Place. In silent bounds, bordering the mortal's plain, crossing a wide expanse of brilliant peace, Narad, the heavenly sage from paradise, came chanting through the large and lustrous air. As darts a lightning streak, a glory fell, nearly, until the rapt eyes of the sage looked out from luminous cloud and strangely limbed. His face, a beautiful mask of antique joy, appearing in light, descended where arose King Aswapati's palace to the winds in Madra, flowering up in delicate. He sang to them of the lotus heart of love, with all its thousand luminous buds of truth, which, quivering, sleeps, veiled by apparent things. Even as he sang, and rapture stole through earth-time and caught the heavens, came with a call of hooves as her swift heart hastening, Savitri. Her radiant tread glimmered across the floor. She stood before her mighty father's throne. He flung her on his vast, immortal look. His inner gaze surrounded her with its light. What feet of gods, what ravishing flutes of heaven have thrilled high melodies round, from near and far, approaching through the soft and reveling air. Which, still surprised, thou hearest. They have fed thy silence on some red strange ecstasy fruit, and thou hast trod the dim moon peaks of bliss. Reveal, O winged with light, whence thou hast flown, hastening bright-hued through the green, tangled earth, thy body rhythmical with the spring bird's calls. But Aswapati answered to the seer, as grows the great and golden bounteous tree, flowering by Alakananda's murmuring waves, where the enamored speed the waters run, lisping and babbling to the splendor of morn, and cling with lyric laughter round the knees. Of heaven's daughters, dripping magic rain, pearl bright from moon god limbs, and cloudy, so are her dawns, like jeweled leaves of light. So casts she her felicity on men. Virgin, who comest, perfected by joy, reveal thy name, thy sudden heart beats learned. Whom hast thou chosen, kingliest among men? And Savitri answered with her still calm voice, as one who speaks beneath the eyes of fate. Father and King, I have carried out thy will. One whom I sought, I found, in distant lands. I have obeyed my heart. I have heard its call. My Father, I have chosen. This is done. Astonished, all sat silent for a space. Then Aswapati looked within and saw a heavy shadow float above the name, chased by a sudden and stupendous light. But now the queen, alarmed, lifted her voice. O seer, thy bright arrival has been timed to this high moment of a happy life. Hide not from us our doom, if doom is ours. This is the worst, an unknown face of fate, a terror ominous, mute, felt more than seen. Behind our seat by day, our couch by night, a fate lurking in the shadow of our hearts, the anguish of the unseen that waits to strike. To know is best, however hard to bear. Then cried the sage, piercing the mother's heart, forcing to steal the will of Savitri. His words set free the spring of cosmic fate. The truth thou hast claimed, I give to thee the truth. Heaven's greatness came, but was too great to stay. 12 swift-winged months are given to him and her. This day, returning, Satyavan must die. But the queen cried, vain then can be heaven's grace. Mounting thy car, go forth, O Savitri, and travel once more through the peopled lands. Plead not thy choice, for death has made it vain. But Savitri answered from her violent heart, once my heart chose, and chooses not again. The word I have spoken can never be erased. It is written in the record book of God. O child, in the magnificence of thy soul, dwelling on the border of a greater world, and dazzled by thy superhuman thoughts, thou lendest eternity to a mortal hope. Thou who art human, think not like a god, for man, below the god, above the brute, is given the calm reason as his guide. Leave not thy goal to follow a beautiful face. And Savitri replied with steadfast eyes, if for a year that year is all my life, and yet I know this is not all my fate, only to live and love a while and die. For I know now why my spirit came on earth, and who I am, and who he is I love. I have looked at him from my immortal self. I have seen God smile at me in Satyavan. I have seen the eternal in a human face. Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain. Then, after a silence, Narad made reply. Turning his lips to earthly sound, he spoke, implacable in the passion of their will. Lifting the hammers of titanic toil, the demiurges of the universe work. They shape with giant strokes their own. Their sons are marked with their enormous stamp of fire. The eternal suffers in a human form. He has signed salvation's testament with his blood. He has opened the doors of his undying peace. How shall he cure the ills he never felt? He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Hard is the world Redeemer's heavy task. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his Son. For this he must go down into the pit. For this he must invade the dolorous vasts, imperishable and wise and infinite. He still must travel hell, the world to save. Haste not toward Godhead on a dangerous road. Open not thy doorways to a nameless power. Climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. Against the law he pits his single will. Across its way he throws his pride of might. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms, aspiring to live near the deathless sun. Bear thou shalt find at last thy road to bliss. Bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives. Indifference, pain, and joy, a triple disguise. Attire of the rapturous dancer, in the ways withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. O mortal, who complainst of death and fate, thou art thyself the author of thy pain. Once, in the immortal boundlessness of self, in a vast of truth and consciousness and light, the soul looked out from its felicity. Then, curious of a shadow thrown by truth, it strained toward some otherness of self. It was drawn to an unknown face, peering through the night. As one drawn by the grandeur of the void, the soul attracted, leaned to the abyss.
Now.
A huge descent began, a giant fall. For what the spirit sees creates a truth, and what the soul imagines is made a world. Then Aswapati answered to the seer, I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compeer of fate? But Narad answered, covering truth with truth, a day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carry the human hope in a heart left sole to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge. He spoke and ceased and left the earthly scene. Away from the strife and suffering on our globe, he turned toward his far-off, blissful home, a brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven. The luminous body of the eternal seer assailed the purple glory of the noon and disappeared like a receding star vanishing into the light of the unseen. End of Book 6, The Book of Fate. Canto 1. The joy of union, the ordeal of the foreknowledge of death, and the heart's grief and pain. Once more she sat behind loud hastening hooves, a speed of armored squadrons and a voice far heard of chariots bore her from her home. A couchant earth wakened in its dumb muse, looked up at her from a vast indolence. Arrived in that rough-hewn homestead they gave, questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, their pride and loved one, to the great blind king. A regal pillar of fallen mightiness and stately care-worn woman, once a queen, who now hoped nothing for herself from life, but all things, only hoped for her one child. They parted from her with pain-fraught, burdened hearts, helpless against the choice of Savitri's heart. They left her to her rapture and her doom. A worshipped empress, all once vied to serve, she made herself the diligent serf of all, nor spared the labor of broom and jar and well. Or close gentle tending, or to heap the fire of altar and kitchen, no slight task allowed to others that her woman's strength might do. But Satyavan sometimes half understood the unplumbed abyss of her deep, passionate want. Yet ever they grew into each other more. Until it seemed no power could rend apart, since even the body's walls could not divide. For when he wandered in the forest oft, her conscious spirit walked with him and knew his actions, as if in herself he moved. He, less aware, thrilled with her from afar. The Parable of the Search for the Soul, Canto 2. Above her brows, where will and knowledge meet, a mighty voice invaded mortal space. As the voice touched her body, became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance, a stone of God lit by an amethyst soul. Her heart listened to its slow, measured beats. Why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth? O spirit, O immortal energy, if 'twas to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with hard, tearless eyes await thy doom, arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, "Why should I strive with earth's unyielding laws, or stave off death's inevitable hour? This surely is best to practice with my fate." And follow close behind my lover's steps, and pass through night, from twilight to the sun, across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. The voice replied, "Is this enough, O spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came?" Then Savitri's heart fell mute. It spoke no word. A power within her answered the still voice, "I am thy portion, here charged with thy work. As thou myself seated forever above, speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice, command, for I am here to do thy will." And the voice replied, "Remember why thou camest. Find out thy soul, recover thy hid self in the enormous emptiness of thy mind. Thou shalt see the Eternal's body in the world. Know him in every voice heard by thy soul. Then shalt thou harbor my force and conquer death." Then Savitri by her doomed husband sat, still rigid in her golden, motionless pose, a statue of the fire of the inner sun. She looked into herself and sought for her soul. Canto 3, the entry into the inner countries. Then Savitri surged out of her body's wall and stood a little span outside herself at the dim portal of the inner life. A formidable voice cried from within, "Back, creature of earth, lest tortured and torn thou die." The serpent of the threshold hissing rose, and trolls and gnomes and goblins scowled and scared. And wild beast roarings thrilled the blood with fear, and menace muttered in a dangerous tongue. Unshaken, her will pressed on the rigid bars. Her being entered into the inner worlds. Across a perilous border line she passed, where life dips into the subconscient dusk, or struggles from matter into chaos of mind. a swarm with elemental entities and fluttering shapes of vague half-bodies, thought, and crude beginnings of incontinent force. The state now threatened. This she pushed from her. Then, journeying forward through the self's wide hush, she came into a brilliant, ordered space. There life dwelt, parked in an armed tranquility. A chain was on her strong, insurgent heart. There one stood forth who bore authority on an important brow and held a rod. His sentences savored the oracle. Traveler or pilgrim of the inner world, O aspirant to the perfect way of life, here find it. Rest from search and live at peace. Savitri replied, casting into his world sight's deep release, the heart's questioning inner voice. Happy are they who in this chaos of things, this coming and going of the feet of time, can find the single truth, the eternal law. Happiest who stand on faith as solid as a rock. But I must pass, leaving the ended search. Truth's rounded outcome firm, immutable, and this harmonic building of world fact, this ordered knowledge of apparent things, here I can stay not, for I seek my soul. None answered in that bright, contented world, but some murmured. Passers-by from kindred spheres, each by his credo judged the thought she spoke. Who, then, is this who knows not that the soul is a least gland or a secretion's fault, but others, nay, it is her spirit she seeks, but none has touched its limbs or seen its face. Another with mystic and unsatisfied eyes, who loved his slain belief and mourned its death. Is there one left who seeks for a beyond? Can still the path be found? Opened the gate? So she fared on across her silent self. To a road she came, thronged with an ardent crowd, guests from the cavern of the secret soul. And Savitri, mingling in that glorious crowd, longed once to hasten, like them, to save God's world, outstretching her hands to stay the throng. She cried, O happy company of luminous gods, reveal, who know, the road that I must tread to find the birthplace of the occult fire and the deep mansion of my secret soul. One answered, pointing to a silence dim on a remote extremity of sleep in some far background of the inner world. O Savitri, from thy hidden soul we come. Then Savitri, following the great winding road, came where it dwindled into a narrow path, trod only by rare and wounded pilgrims' feet. A few bright forms emerged from unknown depths and looked at her with calm, immortal eyes. There was no sound to break the brooding hush. One felt the silent nearness of the soul. Canto 4, the triple soul forces. Here from a low and prone and listless ground, the passion of the first ascent began. A woman sat in a plain, lustrous robe, the mother of the 7 sorrows bore. The 7 stabs that pierced her bleeding heart. In soft, sweet, training words, slowly she spoke. O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. To share the suffering of the world I came. I draw my children's pangs into my breast. I am the hope that looks towards my God who never came to me till now. His voice I hear that ever says, I come. I know that one day he shall come at last. She ceased, and like an echo from below, answering her pathos of divine complaint, a voice of wrath took up the dire refrain. I am the man of sorrows. I am he who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. To enjoy my agony, God built the earth. My passion he has made his drama's theme. I am the doer of demonic deeds. I was made for evil. Evil is my lot. And Savitri heard the voice, the echo heard, and turning to her being of pity spoke. Madonna of suffering, mother of grief divine, thou art a portion of my soul, put forth to bear the unbearable sorrow of the world. But thine is the power to solace, not to save. One day I will return, a bringer of strength, and make thee drink from the Eternal's cup. On passed she in her spirit's upward route. A woman sat in gold and purple sheen, armed with the trident and the thunderbolt, her feet upon a couchant lion's back. Aspired the harmony of puissant voice. O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. I am Durga, goddess of the proud and strong, and Lakshmi, queen of the fair and fortunate. I wear the face of Kali when I kill. I trample the corpses of the demon hordes. I shall hear the silver swing of heaven's gate when God comes out to meet the soul of the world. She spoke, and from the lower human world an answer, a warped echo, met her speech. The voice rose up and smote some inner sun. I am the heir of the forces of the earth. Slowly I make good my right to my estate. When earth is mastered, I shall conquer heaven. The gods shall be my aids or menial folk. No wish I harbor unfulfilled shall die. Omnipotence and omniscience shall be mine. And Savitri heard the voice, the warped echo heard, and turning to her being of power, she spoke. Madonna of might, mother of works and force, thou art a portion of my soul put forth. Thou hast given men strength, wisdom thou couldst not give. One day I will return, a bringer of light. Then will I give to thee the mirror of God. Thou shalt see self and world as by him they are seen, reflected in the bright pool of thy soul. Ascending still her spirit's upward route, she came into a high and happy space. Here, living center of that vision of peace, a woman sat in clear and crystal light. A low music heard became her floating voice. O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. I have come down to the wounded, desolate earth to heal her pangs and lull her heart to rest. I shall save earth if earth consents to be saved. She spoke, and from the ignorant nether plane, a cry, a warped echo, naked and shuddering came. I am the mind of God's great, ignorant world. Ascending to knowledge by the steps he made. If God is at work, his secrets I have found, but still the cause of things is left in doubt. I know not, and perhaps shall never know. Human I am, human, let me remain, till in the inconscient I fall dumb and sleep. And Savitri heard the voice, the warped answer heard, and turning to her being of light, she spoke. Madonna of light, mother of joy and peace, thou art a portion of myself put forth to raise the spirit to its forgotten heights and wake the soul by touches of the heavens, even if thou rain down intuition's rays. The mind of man will think it earth's own gleam. His hunger for the eternal thou must nurse, and bring God down into his body and life. One day I shall return, his hand in mine, and thou shalt see the face of the Absolute. Canto 5, The Finding of the Soul. Onward she passed, seeking the soul's mystic cave. At first she stepped into a night of God. The face of dawn out of mooned twilight grew. Day came, priest of a sacrifice of joy. Into the worshipping silence of her world, he carried immortal luster as his robe, trailed heaven like a purple scarf, and wore as his vermilion caste mark a red sun. An awful dimness wrapped the great rock doors. Carved in the massive stone of matter's trance, two golden serpents round the lintel curled. Enveloping it with their pure and dreadful strength, looked out with wisdom's deep and luminous eyes. An eagle covered it with wide, conquering wing. Flames of self-lost, immobile reverie, doves crowned the gray musing cornices like sculptured postures of white-bosomed peace. Across the threshold sleep she entered in, and found herself amid great figures of gods, conscious, in stone, and living without breath. Watching with fixed regard the soul of man, executive figures of the cosmic self, world symbols of immutable potency, there was no step of breathing men, no sound, only the living nearness of the soul. And thus she passed in that mysterious place, through room and room, through door and rock-hewn door, she felt herself made one with all she saw. A sealed identity within her woke. She knew herself the beloved of the Supreme. These gods and goddesses were he and she, the adorer and adored, self-lost and one. In the last chamber, on a golden seat, one sat whose shape no vision could define. Only one felt the world's unattainable fount, a power of which she was a straying force, an invisible beauty, goal of the world's desire, a sun of which all knowledge is a beam, a greatness without whom no life could be. Thence all departed into silent self, and all became formless and pure and bare. Then, through a tunnel dug in the last rock, she came out where there shone a deathless sun. A house was there, all made of flame and light, and crossing a wall of doorless living fire, there, suddenly, she met her secret soul. A being stood, immortal, in transience, deathless, dallying with momentary things. She had come into the mortal body's room. But since she knows the toil of mind and life as a mother feels and shares her children's lives, she puts forth a small portion of herself, a being no bigger than the thumb of man, into a hidden region of the heart, to face the pang and to forget the bliss, to share the suffering and endure earth's wounds, and labor mid the labor of the stars. Here, in this chamber of flame and light, they met. They looked upon each other, knew themselves, the secret deity and its human part. The calm, immortal, and the struggling soul. Then, with a magic transformation's speed, they rushed into each other and grew one. Once more she was human, upon earthly soil, in the muttering night, amid the rain-swept woods and the rude cottage where she sat in trance. But now the half-opened lotus bud of her heart had bloomed and stood disclosed to the earthly ray. In an image shone revealed her secret soul. In its deep lotus home her being sat, as if on concentration's marble seat, calling the mighty mother of the worlds to make this earthly tenement her house. As in a flash from a supernal light, a living image of the original power, a face, a form, came down into her heart and made of it its temple and pure abode. Out of the inconscience, soulless, mindless night, a flaming serpent rose, released from sleep. It rose, billowing its coils, and stood erect. And climbing mightily, stormily on its way, it touched her centers with its flaming mouth, as if a fiery kiss had broken their sleep. They bloomed and laughed, surcharged with light and bliss. All underwent a high celestial change, breaking the black inconscience blind mute wall. Each part of the being trembled with delight, lay overwhelmed with tides of happiness. In the country of the lotus of the head, in the castle of the lotus twixt the brows, in the passage of the lotus of the throat, in the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, in the navel lotus's broad imperial range, in the narrow nether center's petty parts, in the deep place where once the serpent slept, a firm ground was made for heaven's descending might. Canto 6, Nirvana and the Discovery of the All-Negating Absolute. Above the cherished head of Satyavan, she saw, not now, fate's dark and lethal orb. A golden circle round a mystic sun disclosed to her newborn predicting sight, the cyclic rondure of a sovereign life. Once, as she sat in deep, felicitous muse, an abyss yawned suddenly beneath her heart. A formless dread, with shapeless, endless wings, filling the universe with its dangerous breath, a denser darkness than the night could bear, enveloped the heavens and possessed the earth. Then from the heights a greater voice came down, the word that touches the heart and finds the soul, the voice of light after the voice of night. O soul, bear not thy kingdom to the foe, that all in thee may reach its absolute. God must be born on earth and be as man, that man, being human, may grow even as God. Cast off thy mind, step back from form and name, annul thyself, that only God may be. Thus spoke the mighty and uplifting voice, and Savitri heard. She bowed her head and mused, plunging her deep regard into herself, in her soul's privacy, in the silent night. Her body's thoughts climbed from her conscious limbs and carried their yearnings to its mystic crown, where nature's murmurs meet the ineffable. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool, when a stray stone disturbs its dreaming rest. Then all grew still. Nothing moved any more. Immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary, a silent spirit pervaded silent space. Unutterably effaced, no one and null, a vanishing vestige like a violet trace, a faint record merely of a self now past. She was a point in the unknowable. Canto 7, Discovery of the Cosmic Spirit and the Cosmic Consciousness. Yet all was not extinct in this deep loss. The being traveled not toward nothingness. There was some high, surpassing secrecy. And when she sat alone with Satyavan, her moveless mind with his that searched and strove in the hush of the profound and intimate night, She turned to the face of a veiled, voiceless truth, hid in the dumb recesses of the heart, or waiting beyond the last peak climbed by thought. But now she sat by sleeping Satyavan, awake within, and the enormous night surrounded her with the unknowables, vast. Out of the infinitudes all came to her. Into the infinitudes sentient she spread. Infinity was her own natural home. Nowhere she dwelt, her spirit was everywhere. The distant constellations wheeled round her. Earth saw her born. All worlds were her colonies. The greater worlds of life and mind were hers. All nature reproduced her in its lines. Its movements were large copies of her own. She was the single self of all these selves. She was in them, and they were all in her. Canto 3, Death in the Forest. Then silently she rose and, service done, bowed down to the great goddess, simply carved by Satyavan upon a forest stone. What prayer she breathed, her soul and Durga knew. Perhaps she felt in the dim forest huge, the infinite mother watching over her child. Perhaps the shrouded voice spoke some still word. At last she came to the pale mother queen, She spoke but with guarded lips and tranquil face, and forced upon her speech an outward peace. One year that I have lived with Satyavan, I have not gone into the silences of this great woodland that enringed my thoughts. Now has a strong desire seized all my heart. To go with Satyavan, holding his hand. Release me now, and let my heart have rest. She answered, do as thy wise mind desires, O calm child sovereign, with the eyes that rule. Where beauty and grandeur and unspoken dream, where nature's mystic silence could be felt, communing with the secrecy of God. But Satyavan had paused. He meant to finish his labor here, that happy, linked, uncaring, they too might wander free in the green deep, primeval mystery of the forest's heart. Wordless, but near, she watched, no turn to lose, of the bright face and body which she loved. But Satyavan wielded a joyous axe. He sang high snatches of a sage's chant. But as he worked, his doom upon him came. Now the great woodsman hewed at him, and his labor ceased. Lifting his arm, he flung away the poignant axe, far from him, like an instrument of pain. She came to him in silent anguish and clasped, and he cried to her, Savitri, a pang cleaves through my head and breast, as if the axe were piercing it and not the living branch. Then Savitri sat under branches wide, but leaned beneath a fortunate kingly trunk. She guarded him in her bosom and strove to soothe his anguished brow and body with her hands. He cried out in a clinging last despair, Savitri, Savitri, oh, Savitri, lean down, my soul, and kiss me while I die. And even as her pallid lips pressed his failed, losing last sweetness of response, his cheek pressed down her golden arm, she sought his mouth, still with her living mouth, as if she could persuade his soul back with her kiss, then grew aware they were no more alone. Something had come there, conscious, vast, and dire. She knew that visible death was standing there, and Satyavan had passed from her embrace. End of Book 8, the Book of Death.